Deep space echoes with a desperate plea for salvation, ignored by every civilized species in the Galactic Federation. But a response arrives from the darkest, most lethal sector of the cosmos: humanity, Deathworlders. And they didn't just bring a rescue ship, they brought the fury of a dying star. Administrator Graham stared at the main tactical console, his hands trembling as the holographic display painted a picture of absolute annihilation. Above the colony of New Providence, the orbital defense grid was failing. Searing lances of crimson energy pierced the fragile atmospheric shields, raining localized destruction upon the civilian sectors. The Sovereign Armada had arrived exactly as the deep space probes had predicted, and they brought with them a fleet large enough to glass the entire continent. Graham wiped a bead of cold sweat from his brow. His species, the peaceful and highly diplomatic colonists of this sector, possessed nothing resembling a standing military. They relied entirely on the Galactic Federation for protection. For the past 12 hours, Graham had been broadcasting a continuous, desperate SOS on every known emergency frequency, begging the Federation for immediate intervention. The communication relay chimed. A secure channel opened, projecting the crisp, immaculate image of Counselor William, a high-ranking official within the Federation's core worlds. "Counselor," Graham breathed, leaning heavily against the console. "Please tell me the Vanguard is in slipspace. Our shields are at 19%. The Sovereign cruisers are moving into low orbit. We have millions of civilians trapped in the primary shelters." William's expression remained tragically neutral, devoid of the panic that currently gripped Graham's heart. "Administrator Graham, the Council has convened and reviewed the tactical telemetry you provided. The Sovereign Armada's current fleet strength exceeds our acceptable casualty thresholds. Deploying a Federation task force would result in catastrophic losses to our central defense fleet. We cannot risk the core worlds." "You are abandoning us?" Graham's voice cracked, ascending into a desperate pitch. "New Providence is a chartered colony. We pay our tithes. We abide by the treaties. Protocol dictates that we must preserve the structural integrity of the Federation," William replied, his tone smooth, practiced, and utterly devoid of empathy. "I am truly sorry, Graham. May the ancestors grant you peace." The transmission cut out, leaving behind a sterile hiss of static. Graham collapsed into his command chair, the weight of 1,000,000 doomed souls crushing his spirit. The console blared a proximity warning as another orbital defense platform detonated, raining molten slag into the upper atmosphere. They were entirely alone. Then, an anomaly registered on the deep space sensors. It was not a Federation signal. It did not carry the clean, harmonious encryption keys of the inner worlds. It was raw, heavy, and saturated with aggressive broadband interference. The audio channel violently forced itself open, overriding the bunker's internal firewalls with brute force decryption protocols that looked less like software and more like a digital battering ram. "New Providence Command. This is Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the United Earth Space Force Dreadnought Archangel." The voice was deep, gravelly, and echoed with a terrifying calm that sent shivers down Graham's spine. "We are reading your distress beacon. Hang tight, Administrator. The cavalry is exactly 3 minutes out." Graham stared at the speaker, his mind struggling to process the name. United Earth. Humanity. The Deathworlders. In the wider galaxy, humanity was an anomaly, a terrifying mistake of evolution. They originated from a class, 9 Deathworld, a hyper-violent, tectonically unstable rock with extreme weather, lethal microorganisms, and apex predators. While other species evolved in harmonious, resource-rich environments, humans fought for every inch of their survival. The Galactic Federation had actively quarantined their sector, terrified of their aggressive engineering, their dense muscle mass, and their sheer, unadulterated resilience. No one asked humans for help. No one even dared to enter their sovereign space. "Admiral Hayes," Graham stammered, frantically leaning toward the microphone. "You cannot intercept them. The Sovereign Armada has over 60 capital ships. Their plasma batteries will vaporize your vessels. Flee, before you are dragged into our grave." A low, rumbling chuckle echoed over the comms. "Administrator, with all due respect, my boys and girls haven't had a proper fight since the Orion skirmishes. We're tracking the Sovereign fleet. Keep your heads down." Hayes out. In the cold vacuum of space, far beyond the gravity well of New Providence, the fabric of reality began to tear. The Federation used elegant slip-space drives that slipped through dimensions like a needle through silk. Humanity did not. Utilizing heavily modified brute force singularity engines, a terrifying evolution of the early SpaceX Lockheed coalition, drives the human fleet shattered the dimensional barrier. Space warped violently, bleeding harsh violet light before spitting out the Archangel. The human dreadnought was a behemoth of angular armor, scarred titanium, and exposed thruster banks. It was not built for aesthetics. It was a floating fortress of kinetic violence. Following closely behind were 24 destroyers and a swarm of heavily armored frigates, their hulls stamped with the logos of centuries-old defense contractors that had evolved into interstellar conglomerates: General Dynamics, Raytheon, and Boeing Airbus Starliners. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Archangel, his hands clasped behind his back. The bridge was bathed in red tactical lighting, a stark contrast to the bright, sterile environments of Federation ships. "Slipspace translation complete, Admiral," reported Tactical Officer Dominic Reed, his fingers dancing across the holographic targeting arrays. "We are in the New Providence system. Sensors are painting 64 sovereign capital ships in high orbit. They are currently bombarding the planetary shields. Bring the main fusion drives online." "I want a direct intercept course," Hayes ordered, his eyes locked on the tactical display. "Power up the Raytheon antimatter torpedoes. Let's remind the galaxy why they keep us locked in the dark." Commander Vincent of the Sovereign Armada sat comfortably in his command throne aboard the flagship Crimson Dawn. The bombardment of New Providence was proceeding perfectly. The pathetic colonists possessed no weapons capable of penetrating sovereign energy shields, and their distress calls had, as predicted, been ignored by the cowardly Galactic Federation. It was a flawless subjugation. "Commander," the sensor operator called out, a note of genuine confusion bleeding into his strict military cadence. "We are registering massive spatial ruptures on the edge of the system. A fleet has translated from slipspace." Vincent frowned, swirling a glass of deep purple wine. "The Federation finally found their courage? How many vessels? Are they forming a blockade?" "Negative, sir. The drive signatures do not match Federation technology. They are archaic, brutal, massive localized gravity distortions. And they are not forming a blockade. They are burning straight toward us at maximum acceleration." Vincent leaned forward, the wine glass forgotten. "Magnify." The main view screen shifted, replacing the burning atmosphere of New Providence with the dark void of space. Rushing toward them was a wedge formation of jagged, dark gray vessels. They possessed no elegant, glowing nacelles, no sweeping aerodynamic curves. They looked like massive blocks of iron and depleted uranium strapped to fusion torches. At the center led a dreadnought so massive it momentarily eclipsed the distant starlight. "Identify them," Vincent snapped. "Scanning." "Sir, reading biological signatures. Dense bone structure. High iron content in the blood. Atmospheric composition of the ships is 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen." The operator's face drained of color. "Commander, they are humans. The Deathworlders." A murmur of panic swept through the bridge of the Crimson Dawn. The Sovereign Armada feared very little, but the terrifying myths of Earth were universal. Stories of beings who survived catastrophic kinetic impacts, who could operate in gravity fields that would crush a normal alien's internal organs, and who used controlled nuclear detonations just to propel their ships. "Maintain formation," Vincent roared, standing up to project authority. "They are primitives. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. Redirect the primary plasma batteries. Lock on to their lead dreadnought. Turn them into ash." Aboard the Archangel, the proximity alarms wailed. "Admiral," Dominic Reed called out, his eyes tracking a barrage of incoming fire on the displays. "The Sovereign flagship is reorienting. They are locking primary plasma batteries on us." Firing solution detected. "Divert auxiliary power to the forward deflectors," Hayes commanded calmly. "Brace for impact." In the silence of the void, Three massive beams of superheated plasma erupted from the Sovereign flagship, carving a blinding path through the darkness. The beams struck the Archangel dead center. On the bridge of the Crimson Dawn, Vincent smirked. No Federation ship could survive a direct hit from a triple-linked plasma battery. The sheer thermal shock would melt their bulkheads and ignite their atmospheres. The blinding light of the impact faded. Vincent's smirk vanished. The human dreadnought burst through the dissipating energy cloud, completely intact. The massive ablative armor plating on its bow forged in the high-gravity, superheated foundries of General Dynamics on Venus was glowing a dull, cherry red, but the structural integrity remained uncompromised. "Impossible," Vincent whispered. "Their shields should have collapsed. Their hulls should be slag." What the Sovereign Armada did not understand was that humanity's homeworld orbited a highly volatile G-type main sequence star. Earth was constantly bombarded by solar flares and coronal mass ejections. Human engineers had spent centuries perfecting thermal dissipation and electromagnetic shielding just to survive their own solar system. A sovereign plasma beam was little more than a concentrated sun flare to the Archangel. "Damage report," Hayes demanded, gripping the railing as the deck vibrated from the thermal shock. "Forward ablative armor at 85%, Dominic replied, a grim smile touching his lips. "Shields held perfectly. They barely scratched the paint, Admiral." "Excellent. Commander Brooks, deploy the fighter squadrons," Hayes ordered. "Dominic, lock targeting solutions on their center formation. It's time to show them how Deathworlders wage war. Spool up the kinetic drivers." "Kinetic drivers online. Tungsten rods loaded and primed," Dominic confirmed. "Fire." The human dreadnought shuddered violently. Unlike the energy-based weapons of the alien races, humanity still relied heavily on kinetic energy, the simple, undeniable physics of mass accelerated to staggering speeds. From the broadsides of the Archangel, massive rails, electromagnetic cannons, unleashed a barrage of solid tungsten carbide rods. They did not glow. They did not leave a vibrant trail of energy. They were invisible in the darkness, traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. The Sovereign cruisers never saw them coming. The tungsten rods slammed into the sleek, fragile alien ships with the force of small meteors. Sovereign energy shields, designed to dissipate thermal and plasma energy, were utterly useless against solid mass moving at relativistic speeds. The rods punched cleanly through the shielding, pierced the delicate hulls, and exited the other side, shattering main engineering cores and life support systems in a fraction of a second. In an instant, 12 Sovereign cruisers went dark, their internal atmospheres venting violently into the void in silent crystalline plumes. Panic consumed the Sovereign communication channels. Their perfect formation shattered as captains desperately tried to evade the invisible, devastating barrage. But there was nowhere to run. From the hangar bays of the human destroyers, a swarm of strike fighters poured into the fray. Commander Riley Brooks led the vanguard of the fighter assault. Piloting a Northrop Boeing F-99 Wraith, she pushed her engines to the red line, subjecting her body to gravitational forces that would have pulverized any other species in the galaxy. "Listen up, Wraith Squadron," Riley's voice crackled over the tactical net, sharp and full of adrenaline. "These alien bastards think they can bully a colony and get away with it. Let's introduce them to close-quarters Earth hospitality. Target their engine nacelles. Leave them dead in the water." The human fighters darted through the Sovereign fleet like a swarm of angry hornets. They moved with a reckless, terrifying agility, executing maneuvers that defied the elegant, mathematically predictable flight patterns of the Galactic Federation. Riley cut her main thrusters, physically flipping her fighter end over end using attitude jets, and unleashed a volley of microfusion missiles directly into the exhaust ports of a fleeing Sovereign destroyer. The destroyer convulsed as internal explosions ripped through its spine, its hull buckling outward before it tore itself apart in a massive, silent fireball. Down in the subterranean bunker of New Providence, Administrator Graham watched the tactical feed in absolute disbelief. The unstoppable Sovereign Armada, the terror of the Outer Rim, was being systematically dismantled. They weren't just being defeated, they were being slaughtered by a species the galaxy had locked away for being too savage. Administrator, the bunker's comms officer, whispered, tears of relief streaming down his face. The human flagship is hailing us again. Graham scrambled to the console. Admiral Hayes, we are reading the telemetry. I have no words. You are saving our world. Just doing our neighborly duty, Graham, Hayes replied, the sound of secondary explosions echoing faintly in the background of his audio feed. But we're not done yet. We've crippled their escort fleet, but their flagship is trying to spool up its jump drive to escape. And humanity doesn't believe in leaving enemies alive to fight another day. Hayes's voice dropped an octave, turning ice cold. Dominic, prepare boarding pods. We're going to take the Crimson Dawn from the inside. Breaching the hull of an enemy flagship was a tactical maneuver, long abandoned by the Galactic Federation. To the civilized species of the cosmos, ship-to-ship boarding was considered barbaric, needlessly intimate, and statistically inefficient. For the United Earth Space Force, however, it was a time-honored tradition. From the ventral bays of the Archangel, dozens of angular, heavily armored drop pods detached. Manufactured by the Lockheed Martin Orbital Division, these pods were little more than solid blocks of titanium propelled by localized gravity drives. They did not fly, they plummeted. Aboard the Crimson Dawn, the klaxons screamed a deafening warning. Commander Vincent gripped the edges of his console, watching the tactical display paint a terrifying new reality. The human fleet had already decimated his escorts. Now, they were launching projectiles directly at his ship. "Intercept them!" Vincent screamed, his previously pristine uniform now soaked in nervous perspiration. "Point defense lasers! Track and destroy! Do not let them touch the hull!" "Tracking systems are failing, Commander," the tactical officer cried out, his multi-jointed fingers frantically dancing over the holographic interface. The human pods are coated in a radar-absorbent polymer. By the time the targeting software supplied by Palantir Systems gets a lock, they are already out of range. They are moving too fast. "Impact! In 3 seconds!" Another officer shrieked. The Crimson Dawn shuddered violently as the first wave of pods slammed into the flagship's outer hull. The sheer kinetic force of the impacts buckled the internal decks, throwing sovereign officers from their feet. Magnetic clamps, originally designed for deep-sea oil extraction by General Motors centuries ago, deployed from the pods, biting deep into the alien alloy. Then, the shaped fusion charges detonated. Thick, blast-shielded bulkheads blew inward, venting the corridor's atmosphere into the void for a split second before the pod's expandable boarding seals locked the breach. Inside the primary engineering corridor, a squad of sovereign heavy guards took up defensive positions. They leveled their plasma rifles at the smoking breach, their hands shaking. They were accustomed to fighting Federation security forces, fragile beings who broke easily and surrendered quickly. The smoke cleared, revealing the towering silhouettes of human Marines. Clad in bulky, heavily reinforced exo-armor forged by BAE Systems, the Marines looked like walking tanks. The armor was matte black, scarred from previous orbital drops, and utterly terrifying. At the front stood Captain Reynolds, wielding a Sig Sauer heavy mag rifle. Target acquired. Reynolds' voice boomed through his external helmet speakers, mechanically distorted into a guttural growl, suppressing fire. "Move up!" The Sovereign Guards opened fire. Bolts of superheated blue plasma impacted the human armor, splashing harmlessly against the ablative thermal plating. The heat was intense, but the integrated cooling systems underneath the armor barely registered the spike. To the humans, it felt like standing near a warm campfire. Reynolds returned fire. The Sig Sauer mag rifle barked with deafening concussive force, hurling depleted uranium slugs down the corridor at hypersonic speeds. The kinetic impact was devastating. The Sovereign Guards were thrown backward, their light kinetic shielding shattering instantly. "Push forward!" Reynolds commanded, his boots clanking heavily on the alien deck. "Boston Dynamics drones, deploy and secure the flanks. Do not let them lock down the engineering core." From the backs of 2 Marines, heavily modified quadrupedal combat drones leapt into the corridor. The machines, affectionately named Hounds by the troops, scurried up the walls and ceiling with terrifying agility, their automated turrets tracking and neutralizing any Sovereign crew member foolish enough to peek out from cover. Panic spread like a virus through the Crimson Dawn. The Sovereign crew was physically unprepared for the raw aggression and dense muscle mass of the Deathworlders. When cornered, a Sovereign soldier attempted to engage a human Marine in close-quarters combat, striking the Marine's helmet with a ceremonial energy blade. The Marine simply grabbed the alien's wrist, snapping the brittle bone with a sickening crunch, and tossed the soldier aside like a rag doll. Up on the bridge, the internal security feeds played out a horror story for Commander Vincent. His elite guard, the pride of the Sovereign Armada, was being systematically dismantled by primitive apes wielding projectile weapons. "Seal the blast doors to the bridge," Vincent ordered, retreating toward his personal escape pod. "Flood the outer corridors with neurotoxin. If they want to breathe our air, let them choke on it." Releasing localized neurotoxins, the life support officer confirmed, activating the failsafe. Thick, yellow gas hissed from the vents in the corridors leading to the bridge. It was a potent biological agent, designed to paralyze the respiratory systems of any known carbon-based life form within seconds. Reynolds and his squad halted as the gas enveloped them. The environmental sensors on their HUDs flared red, identifying the toxic compound. "Captain, we've got biohazards in the atmosphere," Specialist Bishop reported, checking his wrist-mounted diagnostic screen, scanning the compound. "It's a standard neuroparalytic. Similar molecular structure to a terrestrial snake venom, but less complex." Reynolds laughed, a harsh, abrasive sound over the comms. "Earthbugs sting worse than this. Filters on, Marines. Keep moving." The Sovereign Bridge crew watched in absolute despair as the humans walked through the lethal gas cloud without breaking stride. Their biological filtration systems, designed to handle the hypertoxic environments of Earth's most polluted industrial zones, scrubbed the alien toxin from the air with laughable ease. To species born on perfect, sterile worlds, chemical warfare was a trump card. To humanity, who routinely consumed toxic alkaloids like caffeine and capsaicin for recreation, it was merely an inconvenience. "They are immune," the life support officer whispered, dropping his hands from the console. "Then overload the core," Vincent screamed, losing the last shreds of his sanity. "If we cannot defeat them, we will take them with us. Initiate the scuttle sequence." Before the officer could input the command, the heavy blast doors leading to the bridge groaned under immense stress. A massive thermal lance, powered by an industrial fusion pack, pierced the center of the door, melting the alien alloy into glowing slag. "They're through the blast doors." The door blew inward with explosive force, crushing two console operators beneath tons of metal. Through the smoke and flying debris, the human Marines stepped onto the bridge, their mag rifles raised and sweeping the room. "Secure the command deck," Reynolds barked. "Nobody moves, or you meet your ancestors early." Silence fell over the bridge of the Crimson Dawn, broken only by the heavy, mechanical breathing of the human exosuits and the crackle of electrical fires from the ruined blast doors. Commander Vincent stood frozen near the escape pod access, his hand hovering over the release lever. Reynolds stepped forward, the heavy boots of his BAE systems armor crushing a fallen datapad into dust. He raised his mag rifle, aiming the barrel directly at Vincent's chest. "Take your hand off the lever, Commander," Reynolds warned, his voice projecting clearly across the ruined bridge. "Unless you want to see if your low-gravity biology can outrun a hypersonic slug." Spoiler alert, it can't. Vincent slowly lowered his hand, his pride warring with his deep, primal fear of the massive apex predator standing before him. He was a noble of the Sovereign Armada, a conqueror of a dozen systems. Surrendering to a Deathworlder was an unthinkable disgrace. Yet, looking into the cold, unyielding visor of the human Marine, survival instincts overrode his ego. "You are making a terrible mistake," Vincent hissed, trying to salvage some shred of his authority. "You primitives have no idea what you have interfered with. The Sovereign Empire spans 1,000 star systems. You have just declared war on a god." "We've killed gods before," Reynolds replied dryly. "Usually before breakfast. Bishop, secure the commander. Interface with their mainframe and rip their navigational data. I want to know exactly where these bastards came from." Specialist Bishop moved to the central terminal, deploying a heavy data link cable from his gauntlet. The physical brute force hacking algorithms, Originally developed by the early pioneers at Anonymous and refined by military intelligence, tore through the elegant, mathematically complex sovereign firewalls in seconds. Captain, I'm into their main tactical logs, Bishop reported, his eyes scanning the data scrolling across his HUD. But, sir, you need to see this. It's not just navigational data. I'm reading their encrypted communications. What did you find? Reynolds asked, keeping his rifle trained on the surviving bridge crew. They didn't find New Providence by accident, Bishop explained, his voice tightening with suppressed anger. They were given the exact slipspace coordinates, the shield frequencies, and the patrol routes of the colony's defense grid. Reynolds slowly turned his helmet toward Vincent. Who gave you the intel? Vincent let out a bitter, mocking laugh. Your precious Galactic Federation, of course. Did you truly believe they ignored the distress signal out of cowardice? They sold this colony to us. They traded the lives of these border world peasants in exchange for a 50-year non-aggression pact with the Sovereign Empire. The Federation sacrificed New Providence to protect their own core worlds. Down in the planetary bunker, Administrator Graham, who was monitoring the open audio feed from the human boarding party, collapsed into his chair. The blood drained from his face. The Federation, the very organization they had worshipped, paid taxes to, and trusted implicitly, had orchestrated their execution. Aboard the Archangel, Admiral Hayes listened to the revelation with a jaw set like granite. He slammed his fist against the tactical table, the metal denting slightly under his knuckles. Those bureaucratic cowards, Hayes growled. Dominic, open a fleet-wide channel. Ensure Administrator Graham is patched in. Channel open, Admiral. Listen to me carefully, everyone, Hayes announced, his voice echoing across the human fleet and down to the surface of the besieged colony. The Federation has abandoned New Providence. They sold them out to save their own skins. But humanity doesn't play by their rules. We don't trade lives for politics. From this moment on, New Providence is under the direct protection of the United Earth Space Force. Cheers erupted from the human vessels, a raw, primal roar of defiance that sent shivers down the spines of the listening alien colonists. But the fight isn't over, Hayes continued, his eyes locking onto a massive energy spike registering on the long-range scanners. Bishop, tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. On the bridge of the captured Crimson Dawn, Bishop frantically tapped his console. Admiral, massive slip-space rupture detected on the edge of the system. God, it's enormous. The energy signature eclipses the entire fleet we just destroyed. Vincent smiled, a cruel, triumphant expression returning to his face. I told you, human. We are just the vanguard. You destroyed a patrol fleet. What you are sensing now is a sovereign world breaker, an executioner-class dreadnought, equipped with a singular purpose: planetary fracture. Space tore apart with a violent, sickening lurch. The violet light of the slip-space rupture was so intense, it overloaded the optical sensors on several human frigates. Emerging from the tear was a ship of unimaginable scale. It was a spearhead of black metal, stretching nearly 50 miles from end to end. At its center burned a massive, exposed plasma core, channeling power directly into a forward-mounted siege weapon. Sensors are going crazy, Dominic reported from the Archangel's bridge, his voice perfectly steady despite the apocalyptic threat. They are drawing power from a captive singularity. Admiral, they are targeting the planet. If that weapon fires, it will crack New Providence's tectonic plates. The entire biosphere will be instantly incinerated. Graham's voice crackled over the comms, filled with absolute despair. Admiral Hayes, you must retreat. You have done more than enough. You cannot fight a world breaker. Take your fleet and run. Warn Earth. The Federation will not protect you. Hayes stared at the massive dreadnought on the screen. The logical choice, the tactical choice, was to withdraw. The Archangel and her fleet had secured a massive victory, captured advanced technology, and proven their might. To stay was a guaranteed death sentence. But humans were not known for their logic in the face of impossible odds. Negative, Administrator, Hayes replied, his voice calm, resolute, and terrifyingly cold. We hold the line. He turned to his crew. Helm, bring the Archangel about. Set a direct intercept course for the World Breaker. Put us directly between their primary firing aperture and the planet. Admiral, our shields cannot absorb a planetary siege weapon, Dominic warned. I know, Hayes said, adjusting his uniform collar. But our mass can disrupt their targeting long enough for the colony to evacuate to the deep core bunkers. Reroute all power from life support and weapons into the forward ablative armor. Overload the singularity drives. We are going to ram them. Desperation hung heavy in the air of the Archangel's bridge. The distance between the human dreadnought and the 50-mile-long sovereign worldbreaker was narrowing to incredibly dangerous margins. Internal gravity dampeners wailed in a metallic protest, entirely unable to fully compensate for the violent, shuddering acceleration of the overworked singularity drives. Red emergency warning lights bathed the crew in a bloody, pulsating hue, signaling that life support systems had been completely deactivated to conserve power. Every ounce of available energy was being funneled directly into the forward ablative shields and the massive thruster arrays. The bridge crew breathed through heavy emergency oxygen masks, their eyes locked in silent horror onto the apocalyptic vision filling the main view screen. Worldbreaker primary siege weapon is at 90% capacity, Tactical Officer Dominic Reed reported through his mask. His voice was strained, fighting against the crushing gravitational forces, but his cadence remained perfectly steady. Their targeting reticle is locked dead onto the central continent of New Providence. Sir, if they fire, the impact of their singularity beam will cause total crustal collapse in less than 2 minutes. The mantle will instantly liquefy. Admiral Hayes gripped the command rail with such force his knuckles turned stark white against the dark metal. He stared at the glowing maw of the alien superweapon. Maintain current trajectory, Dominic. If we hit them at this maximum velocity, the sheer kinetic energy transfer should be enough to deflect their firing axis away from the planet. Inform all hands to brace for catastrophic impact. Aboard the captured flagship Crimson Dawn, the atmosphere was just as tense, though for entirely different reasons. Captain Reynolds held Commander Vincent by the collar of his pristine, now ruined uniform, forcing the alien noble to look at the main tactical display. Electrical fires crackled in the background, filling the ruined bridge with the harsh scent of ozone and melted circuitry. Vincent let out a cold, rattling laugh, his multi-jointed fingers twitching with a mixture of malicious joy and utter disbelief. "You are completely insane, human ape," Vincent spat, coughing violently as the lingering traces of human smoke and chemical suppressants irritated his fragile respiratory system. "Do you truly believe your single, primitive vessel can alter the trajectory of a world breaker? You are throwing away your pathetic lives for a colony that your own esteemed Federation leaders already sold to us. Your sacrifice is nothing but a historical footnote, a fleeting spark before the dark." "Maybe," Reynolds growled, tightening his heavy mechanical grip and lifting the Sovereign Commander an inch off the deck. "But humans are notoriously terrible at math. We don't calculate the odds when our people are on the line. Watch closely, alien. You're about to see exactly how Deathworlders die." Suddenly, a high-frequency alert chirped on the Archangel's master communication console. It was not a collision warning, nor was it a failure report from the strained Singularity engines. It was an encrypted subspace communication handshake originating from the dense asteroid belt on the outer rim of the New Providence system. The signal structure entirely bypassed the standard military frequencies, utilizing a secure, commercial quantum encryption protocol that immediately overrode the Dreadnought's tactical display. "Admiral Hayes, this is Director Sarah Koenig of the Maersk Rio Tinto Interstellar Mining Syndicate." A sharp, perfectly calm civilian voice echoed over the secure network. "We've been monitoring your military broadcast, and our corporate legal department has officially determined that a sovereign occupation of this system would severely impact our projected quarterly profit margins. We have heavy industrial assets in this sector, and we absolutely do not appreciate foreign empires depreciating our commercial real estate." Hayes blinked in utter surprise, staring at the incoming data stream as if it were a ghost. "Director Koenig, this is an active military war zone. What assets could a civilian mining consortium possibly have in this sector that can alter this engagement? Human ingenuity, Admiral, Koenig replied with a cold corporate smirk evident in her clipped tone, and a frankly ridiculous amount of private capital. On the long-range scanners, the massive, inert radar signatures within the asteroid belt, previously categorized by both the Sovereign Armada and the Galactic Federation as simple, lifeless iron-nickel asteroids, suddenly shifted. Active thermal camouflage fields dropped away, revealing the staggering reality hidden beneath the floating rock. Emerging from the shadows of the orbital debris was a fleet of 80 gargantuan industrial vessels. These were not sleek military dreadnoughts. They were supermassive automated mining extractors and heavy logistics transport ships owned privately by Maersk Interstellar, Caterpillar Galactic, and the Rio Tinto Group. These ships were immense, ugly blocks of reinforced steel and industrial-grade titanium, built solely to withstand the violent, unpredictable impacts of deep space asteroid harvesting. More importantly, they were equipped with heavy-duty, gigawatt-range plasma excavation lasers designed to crack open the cores of dead planets for rapid mineral extraction. All industrial units. This is Koenig, the director commanded, her voice broadcasting on an open channel for the entire system to hear. Activate the Caterpillar plasma cutters and slaved mass drivers. Target the Worldbreaker's exposed singularity core. Let's show these aliens exactly how we extract profit. Before the sovereign Worldbreaker could unleash its devastating planetary weapon upon New Providence, the 80 private industrial vessels opened fire simultaneously. Massive, blinding beams of focused, high-intensity mining plasma lanced across the dark void, converging entirely on the alien dreadnought's central power core. At the exact same moment, heavy mass drivers built to safely launch multi-ton mineral payloads across star systems hurled massive chunks of unrefined, solid iron ore directly into the Sovereign flagship's defensive screening grid. The advanced Sovereign energy shields, precisely designed to deflect short bursts of military-grade plasma barrages, were utterly overwhelmed by the sheer, sustained, brutal thermal energy of continuous industrial mining lasers. The hull of the Worldbreaker began to melt like wax under a blowtorch. Within seconds, the focused plasma beams pierced the outer armor, cutting directly into the captive singularity that powered the entire vessel. A catastrophic chain reaction rippled through the 50-mile-long ship. The Worldbreaker convulsed violently, its forward siege weapon misfiring into deep space, completely missing the planet below. A localized gravitational implosion tore the massive ship apart from the inside out, collapsing it into a brilliant, silent flash of violet light before it dissipated into harmless, floating cosmic dust. Absolute silence returned to the system. Down in the planetary bunker, Administrator Graham fell to his knees, weeping tears of profound, overwhelming relief. The impossible had occurred. The Deathworlders had completely shattered the invincible vanguard of the Sovereign Empire, not just with their military might, but with the terrifying, unyielding power of their private sector. Admiral Hayes let out a slow, shaking breath, lowering his emergency oxygen mask. Director Koenig, the United Earth Space Force owes your stockholders a massive debt of gratitude. Just send us the exclusive salvage rights to the Sovereign wreckage, Admiral, Koenig replied dryly, the sound of a datapad tapping echoing in the background. We'll call it even. If you were thrilled by this gripping tale of human defiance and corporate warfare against impossible alien odds, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button right now to support independent sci-fi storytelling, and share this video with your fellow sci-fi enthusiasts to spread the word about the terrifying power of the Deathworlders. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another epic galactic battle. What would you do if the Federation abandoned you? Let us know in the comments below.